I don't moonlight as a rapper. My jersey up too high in the rafters. I got a front team, new life and a tractor. Still sipping that moonshine and I'm plastered.
All right, and we are back. We have another episode of the Moonlighters Club while I just play with levels. Another guest. Hello.
Hello.
If you'd like to introduce yourself, you may.
Alrighty, I am Val Bee, and I am the owner of L.I.R Productions.
How'd you come up with the name L.I.R Productions? Because L.I.R is actually a bar.
L.I.R is a bar, and, you know, unfortunately, Facebook business does not allow you to use any punctuation. So
Okay.
I couldn't put in L period I period R period.
I didn't know that.
So it reads as L.I.R, which is really not great for my brand, but it's neither here nor there. But originally, red is my favorite color. I've always worn red at different events, sort of like, you know, every day in my life. I usually have some aspect of red somewhere. And so one of my old bosses started calling me Lady in Red, and then like it started catching on when I would go to the events. People would be like, "Hey, Lady in Red," and so I was coming up with a name, and I was like, L.I.R, Lady in Red Productions.
That's pretty cool.
It's a good fit, yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Have you always been from? Did you go to school for like media-based things?
I did not, actually. My background for education is in psychology.
People go into those fields. I'm like, why? Like philosophy, psychology, anything that like you got to do so much reading. I'm just like, my head
I was
hurts.
like, please just let me read and write. I loved it. I mean, but I do feel like it helps a lot with my career because, you know, for me, I mean, I went into psychology because I was really sort of motivated by sort of what moves people, right?
Yeah.
You know, what makes people tick, what motivates them, what are the things that they hold on to, and all of those things are things that play into my life as an event producer. You know, I have to think about things that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they do events, right? Thinking about the flow, thinking about even the role that you play, right? How present are you? How much do you sort of hold back at moments? So all of these things, how do you read a crowd? And, you know, so all of those things help a lot with events. Especially with like donor relations and stuff as well. So
it's funny you say that. I wanted to study zoology when I was in school and business. I was going to get a dual degree, which like, that's just the dumbest thing ever.
Psychology and business.
And it's funny, like with animals, how much I just learned about people, or like just kind of learning the science of people, how that really does benefit you.
It's
like,
so true. I could totally see it on the animal side too. You know,
I used to do. Oh no, that's just a random thing falling.
It's like, oh God. But yeah, right? Like those like sort of straight primal instincts that like you see exhibited in animals, right? You're like, it does sort of have those moments you step back and you're like.
But even like one of my first jobs, I used to work door-to-door sales.
Oh, wow.
And there were things they taught us that people go through that you take advantage of, like fear of loss. Right. Telling people you're going to miss out on this if you don't do it now. Right, and it's like, oh my God. And that happens all the time. It's like so Prime Day.
Yeah.
And the attitude of indifference, which is probably the one I do the most. Acting like I don't care or not caring about something. It drives people crazy. It's so weird. Like dating is when I'm like, oh man, I remember this. And whenever I was dating, I'm like, I gotta have it. I don't care. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's right. When people when you're not into it, like they think you should be, they get weird. It's crazy.
I have had a lot of fun playing with that one, actually.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is a good one to play with for people. So in terms of reactions.
Psychology.
Yeah.
Did you do that? Did you work in that field at all?
No, I mean, not really. I did a few like random internships when I was studying, but I went right into development. I started working before I even graduated. I was just like always eager. Like, you know, I was like, okay, what's next? So I took a job. I was subcontracted through housing, urban development. Okay. And I used to work with this guy who basically came up with all of this like data around homelessness. And so I worked with him for a little over a year, basically managing his events, conferences, things of that nature. Okay. And then I quit.
It was around HUD and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why'd you...
quit?
Yeah. Was it just not?
Yeah, that is definitely the day that like changed my life forever and like changed me. I was just done. I felt like I remember sitting there. So it was just him and I. He was the managing director, and I supported him. And so I remember after a while feeling like, okay, where am I going to grow here? Where am I going to, like, what am I going to get? What am I getting out of this, like, in the long run? And it just kept feeling like, you know, there weren't many answers to that question. So I was like, I'm ready for like more experience and different experience. And so I literally like walked in, no warning, and was like, I'm done. And I left.
You know, it's funny. It's that like how crazy that would seem to the average person. But in reality, like that's what companies do when they have no more use. You're like, it's like, all right, man, we kind of hit the ceiling.
Hey, yeah.
It's just funny how most people don't know, I'm guilty, like how to look out for themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to have. We need to shake the whole notion that a job is like it's a privilege, because it's like, no, it's not. Like you think it's not. Like you're spending most of your time here.
Yeah.
You should be happy and be doing what you want to be doing, because they need you just as much as you need them.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting the most out of it in any other realm of life, you'd be like, I'm out of here. If it was a relationship, if it was like even family, like you're gonna be like, yo, I'm done. So a job should be the same way. If you hit your ceiling,
I agree. I feel like I've really approached my career that way, right? Like, you know, and again, I mean, I really sort of like reflect back on that first experience where I quit that job, because for me, I walked out and realized I was in complete control of my life. You know, like you have the rush of like, oh my God, what did I just do? I've got rent and bills to pay, you know, all of these things. Like, is this responsible? Was this careless? Should I have done something? But it was like, you know what? Like that moment of clarity of being like, this is a relationship. This isn't about, oh, I need to just like be out here grateful because you bestowed this job upon me. Mm-hmm. Like I worked hard to get to a certain place in my life, and I'm interested in growing, you know, and that's not going to be done sitting in the same place, sitting somewhere where there's not a lot of opportunity. And it's like, I realized it was like, I wanted to take my life in my own hands, you know, and that moment was it for me, you know?
So was at that moment when you started perusing the idea of doing your own thing?
I did. Yeah. So I went so after I left that job, I quickly took another one and was there for about 3.5 years. I ran the young professional division. I actually, when I was hired, there was another development associate who I like quickly replaced. Like 2 weeks, she had been there for a while too, for a number of years. And I sort of came in and they let her go. And they kept me on for 3 years. My director left. I ran the department for about 6 to 8 months, trained my new director, and then left and started L.I.R.
Nice.
Yeah. And, you know, again, I think for me, like I looked at my career opportunities, I guess the same way, like, you know, most people approach their education, you know, for me, it was another opportunity to sort of gain experience, to learn something, to figure out, you know, what my skill set was, what I could bring to the table. And then I was like, okay, cool, next, you know,
So what goes into starting that? So like, I know about legal stuff, right? Getting the name register and all that, but from an actual idea to product, which is a service, how do you get to that point for what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there were a few things. One, the engagement piece of it, right? It really became important to me that I established who I was in this community, sort of in this bigger picture, in this like, you know, pond of opportunity. Who was I and what was I bringing? Okay. I think for me, that was really important. And again, like, right, that's like your brand, you know? Yeah. And so that really, for me, was like, okay, who are the key players that I want to associate myself with, pull into my network, partner with, etc. In terms of the nuts and bolts pieces, I took a leadership course that was offered. It was like a 7-8 week leadership course that taught you basically everything that you needed to do to start and grow your business. Okay. So every week we went over a different aspect. So legal, communication, branding, writing your business plan, all of those. Nice. Yeah, and it was really good. It was nice, too, because there was a lot of other folks in that. There were maybe about like 20 of us. And, we were all just very inspired, right? We were all very inspired, eager, just had a lot of vision. And so there were a lot of great conversations that came out of that, great relationships that came out of that. Brandon Ransom was in that class with me, who a lot of folks know. So there was just like a lot of really
Wait a second, I know him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know you know him.
But I know him?
Yeah, I know you know him.
Like Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, Facebook. So I met him in that class, and that was like a decade ago. So it's I've known Brandon for a long time. So, it's like you think about, again, those relationships that form out of that. And then the career aspect, right? So it was like, who are the organizations, businesses that I wanted to be a part of? And then it really was sort of pulling all of those things together. And I think for me, the hardest part was trying to figure out, if I wanted to go into events, what was the thing that set me apart or that differentiated me from the rest, or from all of these other folks that are doing events? And that was really the piece that I focused on.
Got it. So who when you're ready to go, did you already kind of have a set of prospects or people you could reach out to for business, or did you have to kind of cold call a little bit for that first client?
I think again, because I was so intentional about building my network and building those relationships, I've been doing events for about 15 years in Boston.
Oh, okay.
And there is like, it used to be like, people would be like, man, I see you everywhere. I was like, yeah, that's the point, right? Yeah, you need to see me everywhere, because that, I was like, oh, you didn't really, I'm involved with this, that, and the other. And, and so I liked that. Then it become, it's word of mouth, right? I love being word of mouth. Like my references coming from word of mouth. It's like, okay. Like my first client actually came, somehow he found my website, reached out, and hired me. And I was like, okay, cool. For me, the things that come word of mouth, I think have a bigger sort of impact on me, or just a bigger touch point, because it's about that personal brand. It's about what people have either learned from, felt, experienced, by being at something that I've produced or helped with. And having that takeaway leave such a impact that it inspires you to reach out to me for your next opportunity. That's my sweet spot.
What's it like being a person of color in that space? And the reason I ask that is because the Moonlighters Club, like when we have events, because of I'm fairly quirky. Like, I don't know what other word to use.
Sure. We can go with quirky.
But it's like, I'm like black, but I'm not scary. Right. So
I was going to say, we can go with quirky if you want. I think we both know what it means.
So people are like, when I reach out to people, my network spans from like people I grew up with in Boston, I grew up in Roxbury.
Right.
Or people I work with now. So it's a mix. And the way the event's branded, it's not really put to anything. So the crowd's pretty mixed, man. Yeah, it's like a lot of black, a lot of brown, also a lot of white people too.
Yeah.
And across different economic factors. But I do realize when I see event planners, the way they brand themselves immediately pigeonholes them.
It does.
So it's like Real Dogs Brunching, like realhoodevents.com. And you're like, I get that you want it. If you really want to grow your base, like how do you navigate that? And I always assume you just want everyone to come in. You know what I mean? So is that in your head when you're starting out, as far as what events you want to come to first? What do you want to publish? Because I feel like if you start out and you were doing a bunch of I don't know, like jazz festivals, right? Or hippie fest, that they'd be like, yo, that's the hippie fest person.
Yeah,
we'll reach out to them. So how do you do that so that you don't immediately fall into a specific pigeonhole?
That is a very good and layered question.
Thank you. I'm quirky.
I think that, like, I will say that has been, I mean, for me personally, it's been a piece of cake. Like, I've had no issue. I'm very sort of, I mean, you could say like diverse, right? I have a like, yeah, this is gonna like go into a whole other topic, but I'm originally from Southern California.
Okay.
I have been, private schools my whole life, summer camps. I certainly have been afforded a certain amount of privilege in my life growing up. I will say that my biggest sort of like shock value when I moved east, when I moved to Boston, was how siloed everything is.
Right.
And when you're someone who is not the product of this environment, but you appear a certain way, right? People see me as a brown girl in Boston. So they take the experience of brown people in Boston and just lump me into that.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that one of the things that has been challenging are, like you said, there are those who are very particular, like you're having your sort of hood rich events, and, that's great. I think that, I think for me, because I have continued to sort of span different communities, different environments, like I have sat on the board for BAMS for the last 2 years, which is Boston Art Music Soul Festival. BAMS is great. I also am a member of the Philanthropy Connection in the Junior League.
Nice.
I've been a big sister in Boston for about 8 years. I have pretty much only been in like all women's schools. So it's like I already, span a lot of different environments. And that has been very intentional. And it's funny because that has only been like a thing here in Boston because of it being so divided, and we do our thing here, and and so I do have some communities of color that look at me and sure I'm sure that they they have tons of opinions about the type of person that I am. And I have certainly experienced communities of color looking at me and, why aren't you doing the, chicken and waffle brunch and the, I'm like, first of all, I don't even eat chicken. So, I'm like vegetarian over here. So I'm like, we can go get some sushi, and they're like, what kind of black person are you? So, it's like, I realized, when I moved to Boston that was never, gonna be, I have to be true to myself, and that has never been my experience. It will never be my experience. It will never be my brand. For me, it's about, inclusivity and again, really like, things that have like a purpose to it, know?
So when it comes to outside of attendance, then how can someone look at you and be like, all right, I worked with Val, outside of just like a ton of people coming, how can they rate how good your quality is as opposed to someone else?
Yeah, I mean, even the attendance thing you can't go by, right? I mean, like, this is Boston and, it's like the weather constantly changes. Yeah. People don't really want to go out, people are very particular about how they want to spend their money in Boston, whether they have it or not. That is actually less of an issue. They just, are very particular about how they spend their monies, which is understandable. We work hard for it. Mm-hmm. I would say that for me, it really is about that sort of like full experience. Like I think when you attend my events, you walk away with a feeling, and that's my goal. Anybody can throw a party. Anybody can like pull together an event. Events are a piece of cake to pull together. That is like the least of the event world. It's like, for me, it's about creating an experience. Like, this is a memory that you are giving to somebody to have for the rest of their life, you know? And so I want, when you leave, whether you remember that it's me is less of a concern for me. I want for anybody who comes to events that I've done for you to leave having had a good experience, you know, that it created a good memory, that, you know, was a good feeling. Nice. So that's always my goal, my events.
So when you go out there first starting up, again, we're fairly new to it. We've only done 2 events, and I feel like we luck out because we're somewhat niche.
Yeah.
We have entrepreneurs talking. It's not really a panel.
Yeah.
It's at a brewery. So like that brings another added element.
Totally.
I think it'd be a lot harder if we were like having a party or something like that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to just getting your name out there, is it tough as someone who's new? How much, because you do word of mouth, I assume is huge for stuff like this.
Yeah.
So how hard is it to get those first clients? You're like out there trying to get your events going. What do you have to do to convince someone that it's going to be worth their time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that, again, it's like, you know, you really, in the beginning, it's really just about being everywhere, like being everywhere, whether you are working the event, attending the event, promoting the event, just be everywhere. I mean, that really helped for me in terms of like building up my own brand and my, you know, sort of.
I hope people are like listening to that, because
seriously, it's like be everywhere, you know, because after, like I said, after a while, people were like, why do we keep seeing this chick everywhere? Like, you know, we're like, she was at this event, she was over at that. And I'm like, hey guys, you know, hey again, you know? And so, you know, and it's, again, it's like that idea, right? Like your network is your net worth. It's not just like a tagline, you know, like that is legit. Like your network is everything, you know? And so I always say, like, first and foremost, like think about those relationships that you are building and stewarding, and you have to nurture these relationships. That is like the make it or break it in this industry. And like I said, be visible, be everywhere, get out there, get involved, volunteer, help out. And that was really the other thing, right? It was like, not only do we see Val everywhere, but she's always helping out, you know, people, oh, Val, you know, you have a last minute something, oh, just call Val, you know, and that was really how it started for me. It was like people just knew that, like, you know, if it was a last minute thing or whatever the case, that I would jump in, that I would help. You know, I'm happy to be on call. And then from there, it really was, I think about like sort of pulling those pieces together. And so because people were starting to see me everywhere, people were starting to recognize my connections, my network, you know, then obviously people are like, oh, you know, well, how does she know so-and-so? How is she connected to this? Why is she at that event? You know, she's snapping pictures everywhere, you know, and people want to be a part of what they think is, you know, a buzz, right? So if they see you you know, we gotta figure, let's link up with her. She seems to have, you know, great access, great network, great, you know, whatever. And that was really how things started trickling in, you know, making sure that I kept my website, you know, updated, maintained, constantly, you know, reflecting what I felt the brand was. And then just being visible, being out at events and making sure that you're building those relationships.
What's like, how many, if you're busy, how many events do you have in the pipeline? What does that look like?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, well, this month, I mean, I've literally had something every day except for 2 days out of this month. So, you know, that's a busy month. But it's like, again, it also depends on how much like strategizing you're doing up until the, you know, because some of the things that we're just doing, like day of coordination, that's a lot easier. You know, you don't have to do a lot of lead up planning, coordinating, and anything of that nature. So I always like to say, if I'm working on at least 2 to 4 events at a time, that's like a comfortable sort of pace for me.
Okay.
And I try not to do things more than like, I like to have like a 3-month like window. So I'm always like working out like 3 months, you know.
Okay.
So as long as I feel like I have like 2 to 4, things that I'm working on a month. And so, like I am helping a friend's wedding in September. So we've been meeting to talk about different things, vendors, coordination. I've had something every day this month. One of my business partners, she actually did all of the pre-planning. So nice. I just needed to do the coordination day of. So that was a piece of cake. So it's like, as long as you have like a good balance of, the things that are the pre-planning and just the day of, I feel like it's fair.
Best event you did so far and the most terrible event ever where you were like, oh my God, man. I'm just going to dip out the back.
I will say, okay. The worst, I will say, well, at least for the worst, what makes things the worst is, there are so many things, it's like, it's really bad because it's like, once you become an event, it's like, you're like the behind the scenes, right? You like have this sort of like visibility and like eye for certain event practices, and then you try to like attend events and all you see are like, you're like, oh, that shouldn't have happened and that should be over there. And, it's hard to not critique things. But there was an event that I did earlier this year. And it actually wasn't one that I was planning, but I was partnered on.
Okay.
So we like facilitated one of the like tables, round tables. But like, it seemed like the people running it, like the client itself was not based in the US. So that made like communication a little bit challenging with like time schedules. There wasn't a lot of information provided about the event itself prior to the event. And like, I'm really big on, keeping things like providing as much like detail as possible for the folks involved,
right.
Like I got to the event, the person that I was supposed to, who was sort of like running the show was like nowhere to be found. They were handing out these like certificates at the end and they lost mine. And then, but like, instead of like, oh, okay, like we'll mail you one or, let me just like take your name. And like, they like handed me the certificate and was just like, write your name yourself. And I was like, this is super awkward.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, you're going to keep it. And I was like, what am I even getting a certificate in? So that was like really, that was super strange. But people enjoyed it, but and then that's like, the flip side, right? So that I did this other event a couple months ago or like a month ago. And so the client that I was working with, we kept saying like, this was their first like fundraising event. The organization has been around for a number of years. But I kept saying, what can you tell me about like your crowd, right? Okay. Like your people, what are they into? What kind of music do they like? She was like, I have no clue, right? Like, and okay. So we're like, okay. And we kept getting like really like not positive feedback about like the theme that we had come up, like literally just like everything, like the theme, the look and feel, the food, the entertainment, like everything, which is like, like we're not really sure about any of it, and so you sort of you have this moment, right? Like, because you have to also remember that like when you're working with a client, like this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, so if you want a crap event, like that's your business. This is what you're paying for.
Right.
You don't want an expert's opinion. You want the things that you want. Cool. I can deliver. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
If you have these like weird ass music and, food that nobody wants to eat, like, cool. Like we will roll with that. Like, cause that is what you want. And I'm happy to meet my client's request. Right. surprisingly, so we get into this event. I was like, oh, this is going to be a complete shit show. I had no faith at all. And it turned out to be a super success.
Oh, nice.
Like, people loved it.
Yeah.
The, like, weird-ass music was a hit, you know. There was great attendance, which we weren't expecting. There was a portion of, like, the activities, like, that didn't get used. But, I mean, for what we had sort of planned and expected going into it, you know, it turned out to be a huge success, you know. And then you look at other opportunities where, you know, like there was an event that I ran for 3 years for this nonprofit. And by the third year, it was certainly like the most profitable that we had ever done, which was exciting. You know, but it's like every single time, it's like there are certain things that you just can't predict, you know, attendance, fundraising things, like some of these things are just out of your hands, you know? And so you sort of just have to like roll with the punches. I always say that like the two things that I like refuse to dwell on in my event life are emotions and problems. You know, it's like I'm solution oriented and I'm, you know, I'm positive. Like we're going to keep it together and keep it positive and we're going to get this work done, you know?
I like that.
Yeah.
So doing events, you were telling me that, I don't remember when, but you did eventually go out to just do this on your own.
Yeah.
What's it like making that decision? Like what's going through your head the night before where you're like, I'm just going to do this business? It's one thing if you just like quit a job, you're like, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you know that you're now the breadwinner. When that rent
bill comes in, you know? I mean, I think for me, I've always been a risk taker. You know, and so it was more of the like afterthought, you know, it was like in the moment thought, like is no big deal, right? I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get this. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, like a bill comes in and you're like, oh, like, should I have attacked this with such like, you know, gusto, right? Like maybe I should have like sat and like reflected, you know, but I've never been that person, you know, like I said, I have quit jobs. I have, you know, and so I would say, at least for me, like, it was super exciting making that decision. It's scary, but I think that the way that I manage are a few ways. I think for me, it's like I try to keep something part-time.
Okay.
Or at least something that's going to be like, you know, whether it's like a consulting contract that I know is going for a certain amount of time, one thing that you know is secured for a certain length of time.
Okay.
And I like doing that because then you're afforded flexibility, right? Yeah. You don't have to worry like, oh, okay, you know, if this event doesn't work out or if, you know, their budget, you know, isn't as high as we originally thought, or something comes up that we have to move around things, you know, move numbers around. You know, it's like those things are always going to happen in event life. Rain days, like if an event gets canceled and like there goes your money for the day, you know, so these things happen. So you have to, you know, I like having the one thing that's like set, you know, I know every month I'm at least getting something from this. The other thing is just like being on top of your budget, you know, so it's like I constantly have to reassess my budget. You know, it's like every month I'm like, okay, what contracts do I have this month? And like, what is my, you know, like what does it look like? What do my finances look like? I had someone come up to me at the Hub Week event and was like, how do I not go hungry? You know, and I was like, real talk, you know, I was like, because I don't budget in food. I was like, that's a great one. I was like, first of all, get you some foodie friends, you know, I was like, you know, live close to mom. Exactly. You know, but then that's the other thing too, right? Like if you are engaged going to all of these events, really out there in the community, like they have food. So just like make sure that you're noshing when you're out and about at these things, you know, you know, so it's like you just have to be a little bit more mindful with your approach to certain things. You know, it's really just sort of like looking at your budget, trying to keep something set for a certain period of time, and then being flexible with the rest.
Nice. Yeah. Could you ever be an employee again?
Yeah, I mean, you know. Yes, I could. I mean, I really hate full-time jobs, like, with a passion, but, like, I think that, again, it's about fit, you know, because if I'm somewhere where, you know, like, I hate full-time jobs, like, one, because it's, like, it's a lot of busy work, right? Like, you don't need 40 to 60 hours of my time. Like, you just want me to sit at this desk so that you own my time. Like, that's painful for me. I'm like, I would rather you cut my salary so that I can have these extra 5 hours. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and that's for me, though, you know? And so I think that, like, it's really about understanding, like, the person that you are, how you need to work, how you need to feel compensated and supported. Because I think that, again, it's not always about that dollar. You know, like, for me, I prefer a flexible schedule. I prefer flexibility in terms of where I'm working, you know, and so if I found a full-time job that afforded me those things, it gave me flexibility, that was willing to be as accountable as I am, because I always come to the table and say, hey, I do this stuff on the side. I will keep you posted about what my calendar looks like for this month, and we can work through it. Like, I want a partnership. Even in my workplace, you know what I mean? And I'm not interested in the whole song and dance of, you know, oh, I just have to be grateful and keep my head down and do what you ask. I'm not that person. I'm not built that way. And those are the reasons I stay out of full-time jobs, you know? So I would absolutely go back to full-time life if it provided me with the flexibility that I needed.
Admirable. So if people want to support you, how can they? Where can they find you?
All right. So you can find me, like, anywhere by Val Bee Boston.
Nice.
Or L.I.R Productions, also anywhere. And the website is www.lirproductions.org.
She's also at every event ever.
I'm at every event, like, ever in Boston, anywhere. Always Cambridge, Roxbury, JP, Lincoln.
I literally network. I network to meet contacts for people to interview, but if there's not food, I'm like, damn, I don't know if I'm gonna go.
It's
like, I eat through, I eat through network events.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Like, that's.
I'm like, that's the best part. At the end of the day, you're like, oh, leftover catering. You're like, yes, you know, dinner. It's like, I've got leftover chilicates from this weekend.
Oh, chilicates. Oh my God, who catered with chilicates? That's amazing.
I know. Is it the Muncie group in GP? Yeah, that's
awesome.
I know. So whole tray in my fridge waiting for me.
Nice.
I know.
Well, this is fun. This is very encouraging, and I like the fact that you're not waffling on it. You just know what you want, you know, and you're very upfront about it.
Definitely.
So it's something I can definitely take to heart.
Good.
And I wish you nothing but the best success.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can do an event in the future. Once
I was going to say, let's plan.
Once I make real money,
number 3.
I will.
No worries. You got to start somewhere, right?
So thank you again. And for everyone tuning in, if you are looking for more content, moonlightersclub.com. We put everything there. We're on every major podcast network too, as well as YouTube. We're always looking for new followers, but new guests too. So if you yourself,
pull some of y'all in here.
Yeah, let's rope it in, and then we'd love to hear your story. So thank you again. Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Thank you.
And enjoy it.